This is where theology meets the real world. This is So What About Us? A podcast about tackling real-life problems through the lens of Scripture, learning how to apply God's Word to every single area of life. Because the Christian faith isn't just something we study, it's something we live. In this episode, Pastors Stephen, Ben, and Travis are joined by special guest Larry Piedt to discuss Jesus' calming of the storm and sea from Mark 4:35-41, as well as Job 38:8 from Larry's Sunday evening devotional. And now let's ask the question, so what about us?
All right, welcome to another episode. So what about us? This is episode 11, I believe. Episode 11, we're in the double digits. Joined by my faithful friends. I'm Travis.
I'm Ben.
And also our special guest.
I'm Larry.
Larry. Now, all right, Larry. So I think most people in the church know you, but give us the 2-minute background on who you are, your background in ministry, all those things.
I'm a retired Delta captain on the Airbus. I'm also a retired PCA pastor, teaching elder. I was on staff at Coral Ridge Presbyterian Church under James Kennedy. Also vice president of Evangelism Explosion. And I taught evangelism and apologetics at Knox Seminary. So all the above. Moved up here about 13 years ago. Was on staff at Christ Presbyterian Church in Noonan. We moved up here to be on the lake about 8 years ago, and we've been here at at Christ.
Oh, Freudian
Chestnut,
there.
sorry, I am so sorry. Chestnut Mountain for 6 years now.
Very good.
So, and we're blessed to be here.
Moved up here to be on the lake. How fitting for our text today.
How about that?
All right, so Jesus has been teaching, and we get to a very famous story, one of the greatest stories in the New Testament. People love it. I love it. Jesus calms a storm. So I'm going to read it for us, and then I'm going to try to make some observations for you guys and consider this together. So on that day, when evening had come, he said to them, "Let us go across to the other side." And leaving the crowd, they took him with them in the boat, just as he was. And other boats were there with him. And a great windstorm arose, and the waves were breaking into the boat, so that the boat was already filling. But he was in the stern, asleep on the cushion. And they woke him and said to him, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" And he awoke and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, "Peace, be still." And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. And he said to them, "Why are you so afraid? Have you still no faith?" And they were filled with great fear and said to one another, "Who then is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him?" All right, I've tried to think of lots of clever introductions for this, and I just finally said I can't come up with anything that does it justice. Some of these stories just stand on their own. They're just so great and wonderful and powerful, and so I feel like this is one of them. Talk to you guys about some things I've seen as I've worked through the text, see what you guys see, and then talk about how we apply this. So here's how I'm going to try to preach it. I'm going to start by talking about, okay, they are headed off. One of the things the commentaries, almost to a commentary that I've read, say, well, we don't know why he's going to the other side. You know, he just decides to leave. And I think that's hogwash. He tells you exactly why he's going in chapter 5. There's a man over there with a demon. So Jesus is leaving crowds, these big, massive crowds that he's teaching, to go minister to this man filled with demons on the other side. I'll probably come back to this in chapter 5, but I think there's a ministry lesson there too about, how we view success versus what Jesus goes after. And, the Son of God only spent 3 years doing ministry, and he still took time to go out and minister to a demon-possessed man on the other side of the lake. So he says, let's go off, and they get in this boat. Now, in this section here, there's this weird, Mark has these weird ways of saying things. So they took him with them in the boat just as he was. Nobody really knows why he says just as he was. One popular speculation is that, he didn't go on shore, and that's Mark's way of telling us that he didn't get off the boat and come back on. I find that just unsatisfactory, and I'm speculating here, but I also think that this is Mark's way of saying, this is just the same Jesus. This is just Jesus of Nazareth. This is just the guy that was teaching in the boat that we all knew. He did not go get miraculous powers. He did not get transfigured before our eyes. He's just the same guy in the boat, tells us to leave. I think he's saying that to say, he's about to do the most supernatural thing he's done so far. Nothing about him has changed. It was just that same Jesus. And then also this note that the other boats were with him. And at least Mark Strauss just completely dismisses this. He says this is just Peter's recollection on the fly. Oh, there were also a lot of other boats with him, and that it really adds nothing to the story. It's just a mark of transmitting what happened through the mind of Peter. But it's odd that it says, and the other boats were with him, not with them. It's got this very personal pronoun. And I think this is again speculation, that what it's saying is, if you wonder what happened to the other boats during the storm that's about to come, well, they were with Jesus, so they're okay too. It's just kind of connecting to him, not them. So then a great windstorm comes, and there are all kinds of meteorological, nailed it, got it, explanations for this. A pilot probably appreciates the temperature change between what's the cold air up on the mountains, the warm air down on the lake, because the Sea of Galilee is below sea level. Cold air rushes down, it hits the warm air on top of the lake, it creates these great storms.
Right.
There is a scientific explanation here, but I don't want to linger on that because I don't think that's the point either. And then you have a boat. And so if you go and you look at the Jesus boat, which is this famous boat that was discovered on the Sea of Galilee about from this time period, it's almost exactly the size of our stage. So if you go from the front of the stage right in front of the pulpit to the white barrier between the choir, and then you go from the white thing next to the piano to the white thing next to the organ, that's about the size of the boat. And then the height of the side would have been about the height of the white thing. I keep saying the white thing. What do you call the thing that separates the choir? Partition. That sounds much more scientific. It's about that height. So it's about 3-4 feet high on the side. That's about how big this boat was. Pretty small. And the Sea of Galilee, I looked it up on Google Maps or something, as the crow flies, is about the distance from this church to the square in Gainesville. It's about 8 miles directly. So you kind of get your dimensions of what you're talking about here. So they get in this boat and the storm comes. And then they start to panic and they wake him up and they yell at him. And they say, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" I think this is interesting because I think the other gospels use different words. So I think Matthew says, "Lord, do you not care that we are, perishing?" And Luke may soften it into a prayer. I can't remember. Mark uses teacher because he's just been teaching. So, oh, great and mighty one, I think, that has just been giving us all those powerful lessons. Do you also not care that we are about to die? And I don't know if the we here includes Jesus. So you not care that we all, including you, are about to die? Or if I think it's probably more likely, do you not care that we are about to die? That we, i.e. the disciples, are about to perish. And they wake him up. Here's what I would be curious to see what you guys think. What do you think their expectation of Jesus was? They weren't clearly thinking he was going to calm the storm with the words. Why are they waking him up and yelling at him? What did they think he was going to do?
Company in our misery, right? They probably just thought they'd be worried with us.
Yeah, I thought about this and I came to the same conclusion. Is they don't like how he's peacefully sleeping. And anxiety doesn't like calmness. It wants it to worry with it. And so instead of his peaceful, calm sleeping, sort of translating to them and calming them down, their anxiety must wake him up and make him worried like they are. Because they don't have 13 buckets to bail water. They're going under. They're going to die. Everything in their eyes tells them they are going to die on this sea. They're going to drown to death. They either want Jesus to worry with them, or the last thing they want to do with their final breaths is blame him. You told us to go, and you got us out in the middle of this sea, and you don't even care that we're all about to die. There's something to play on there about how our anxieties manifest themselves, in all these different ways.
I think they were upset with him that he was asleep.
Yeah. Right. To Travis's point, they want him to wake up.
Yeah.
You need to be scared with us. I don't like the calmness that I see in you.
Isn't that the most frustrating thing when you're asleep or when you can't sleep and someone is asleep? It drives you crazy.
Yeah.
Right.
So he wakes up and he speaks to the storm. Peace, be still. And these are actually, we translate this peace and be still, but these are more like verbal things. It's more like be quiet, be silent, don't speak.
I'm familiar with those commands.
So the wind obeys. It calms down. And then he says to them, "Why are you so afraid? Have you no faith? Have you still no faith?" Now this word afraid here, I'm looking at Ben as my local Greek scholar, see if he agrees with my conclusion here. So there is a word for fear, right? It's phobeo. It's phobia. That is not the word he uses here. The word he uses later is phobeo when he says they were filled with great fear. He uses it twice. It's a Hebrewism. So he says they were, they feared a great fear. And the way we translate that is they had a great fear. This is the word deilos, and this is the word coward. And the only other places it's used in the New Testament is in Revelation 21. And the first two kinds of people that are thrown into the lake of fire are cowards, deilos, and the unfaithful, those who have no faith. Jesus says here, why are you cowards?
And have no faith.
And have no faith. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, if you put those passages together, he's saying, why are you acting like non-believers?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right, I think. I told my wife this morning. We were having coffee, and I said, did you know that the word Jesus used here is not what we think of as fear? It's cowards. And I gave her the Revelation verse, and she said, well, speaking as a coward, I find that very convicting.
Did the commentators you looked at make that connection?
No, nobody seems to notate on it. I don't know why. Because the word is just so unique. I mean, it's almost a hapax legomena, which is, a word that's only used once in the New Testament. It's only used at one other time. And you would think it would jump out to people that Jesus uses, because it carries this meaning of like weak need, losing your strength kind of thing. It's, it's why we call it cowardly. I'm going to come back to this, and I'm almost done summarizing here. So he says, why are you so afraid? Why do you still have no faith? And they were filled with great fear, and they said to themselves, who then is this that even the wind and the sea obey him? So my question to you guys is, what is Jesus' expectation of them? Why does he say, why are you so afraid? I mean, doesn't that seem obvious?
I think he's looking back what they have seen with the miracles so far. And he's saying, don't you know who I am?
Right.
Haven't you seen what I've done already?
So yes, I think it's that. But he hasn't promised them that they're not going to drown on the Sea of Galilee in the middle of a storm. Mm-hmm. So why does he say to them, they could very well acknowledge his power, and they're still struggling with it. They clearly don't have a full grasp of it, because you're right, they're not clicking these things together. But is it still wrong to be afraid that you're going to drown in the Sea of Galilee? And he seems to imply that, right?
It could be. He's saying to them, why don't you trust me right now?
Yeah.
Why aren't you trusting that I'm here with you in the boat?
I think that's right, because he says, have you still no faith? So I think that word still would point back to after everything I've done, kind of what Larry was getting at.
And he also ties fear and faith together. It's almost like it's a zero-sum game. The less fear you have, the more faith you have, the more faith you have, it drives out your fear, right? That these two things cannot exist in the same place. Here's why I think he says this. Let's see if I can persuade Larry. He's sitting in Travis's seat, and that's usually where I look for either affirmation or, I need to go change that point. So he says, why are you so afraid? The first thing he said to them in this verse is, let us go across to the other side. He has told them they're getting to the other side. And he says, let us go. So I will be with you, and we will get to the other side. So I think when he says, why are you afraid? It doesn't matter how much water comes over the side of that boat. I told you we're going to the other side. And the thing that he is expecting them to trust in, given all his power, is we cannot see how this is possibly going to end up with us on the other side. We think we're going to die, but Jesus said we're going to the other side. Mm-hmm. And so the one who can heal the leper, cure the withered hand, cure sickness, all these things will get us there, and we don't know how. And this looks like we are going to die, but it's almost like Abraham saying, I assume he'll give me my son back. If we die, then somehow we'll still get there. So that's where I think the real application to us comes. And I have one more strong point of application here, but I want to ponder on this together. He's saying, I told you this. I gave you my word. Now trust me that we'll get there. And, he's asleep in the stern of the boat. I just think this text is so powerful, right? Like it just is such a metaphor that we all get and understand for the storms of our life coming through us. Larry, this might be a good question for you. You've been through plane crashes, and what kind of texts and promises do you go to when you're going through hard things to say, the Lord will get me to the other side?
That's a question I have not resolved, but I like to talk about a lot, because what has happened over my life, and it did not happen in the plane crash till later, but usually when big things are happening in our life, when we've lost family members, we lost a child, we lost a granddaughter, big things, it's like, God. But when the little things happen, the captain in me comes out, and I try to handle it myself.
Oh, that's so insightful, yeah.
Yes, but I've learned that when thing is so huge that there's nothing I can possibly do about it, I immediately said, Lord, what do you want me to do?
Wow.
Why are you doing this?
That's a great point, that bigger the problem and the less in control of it you feel, the more faith you seem to have, because there's all you have left is faith.
Psalm 25 is one I come back to a lot, and says in verse 3, no one who waits on the Lord will be put to shame. So it's not silly or foolish or anything like that for me to trust that the Lord is working something good for me. So waiting, trusting that, God is powerful, God is sovereign, and God loves me. That means that whatever comes to pass is for my good and for his glory.
You said, I was in the youth group last night, and I'm telling you this so you will send this to me before I forget. Your quote last night was perfect. So you were describing faith to the youth, and you had a great way of describing it. You remember what it was?
Yeah. So faith is believing that God is who he says he is, and that he'll do what he says he will do.
See, I think that's a perfect summary of this verse. I'm going to quote you on Sunday.
Oh, perfect.
Jesus is who he says he is, and he is going to do what he says he's going to do. He is the one that is so powerful, and he will get you to the other side. You had something else?
Yeah, the verse I think it encompasses all this is Proverbs 3:5-6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not to your own understanding, but in all thy ways acknowledge him. I like to go back into history and find out how people look at this verse and interpret it when I can't find something right away. And so I was trying to figure out Jesus asleep on the boat. And of course, the text always says on a cushion. Really, he was asleep on a sandbag that the helmsman sat at that guided the boat. That's where he was sleeping. And this comes from Augustine, who said, Jesus asleep on the boat. His Christ asleep in you? Says, when you have to listen to the abuse, this means you're buffeted by the wind. When your anger is roused, you're being tossed by the waves. When the winds blow and the waves mount high, the boat's in danger. Your heart is in peril. Your heart is taken a battering. On hearing yourself insulted, you long to retaliate. But the joy of revenge brings in another kind of misfortune, shipwreck. Why is this? Because Jesus is asleep in you. What do I mean? I mean that you've forgotten his presence. Rouse him then. Remember him. Let him keep watch within you. Pay heed to him. A temptation arises. It's the wind. It disturbs you. It is the surging of the sea. This is the moment to awaken Christ and let him remind you of these words. Who can this be? Even the winds and the sea obey him.
Oh, so good.
Augustine.
Oh, it's great. Well, there's one other thing that I've read in this text all week, and every time I think about it, it gives me chills. So it's strange. I've spent so much time thinking about this text, and the most impactful part for me has not been the stilling of the storm. It's been the very first words of this thing. So it says in verse 35, on that day when evening had come, he said to them, let us go across. You can read all of the meteorological, scientific explanations for why storms randomly happen on the Sea of Galilee, but that's not what's happening at all. It says on that day at that time. So on that specific day, at that specific moment, Jesus says, all right, let's get out into the middle of the lake. And he knows the storm is coming. He's calling for it. The wind and the sea obey him. I just think that was so powerful to me to think about. There are these moments in my life where I can remember the exact day and the exact times when things happened, right? Storms that seem to come out of nowhere. And those weren't random. They weren't just me being the victim of the universal chance of something happening. These were appointments. Yeah, I kind of had this picture in my mind of Jesus sort of looking up, and they don't have watches in first century, but checking his watch and saying, the storm is coming. Let's get out into the middle of the sea. Right? It was at that day, at that time. And you will have these things in your life. You'll have days and times the Lord is appointed for you when these storms will come. And he's going to ask you the same thing he asked of the disciples. Will you trust what he said? To Travis's point, will you trust who he is and that he'll do what he says he will do? Those are the moments when faith shows itself. And so, as I thought about that, just ask you guys, do you have any other moments you can remember where you think, yeah, that was the moment, the day, and the time? You don't have to share details, right? But how did you weather that storm and cling through that thing? You're obviously here, faithful to the Lord, clinging to his promises. I couldn't help but think of your plane crash story, Larry, which, people think about. Even in my own life, I can remember that's the day and the time I look forward to every year, because that's the day and the time the Lord sets storms for me. And so that's what I want to encourage the church with on Sunday, is that you're going to be hit with these things. We were listening to senior testimonies last night. These kids with so much promise and so much potential, so much energy, headed off to college and work and life. And I was sitting there listening to them. I thought, there will be days and times appointed for them where these things are going to come hit them like a storm out of nowhere. And we've done such a good job, and we try to in youth and Sunday school and all these other things, filling people with the words of God so that they have something to trust in when those things come.
In seminary, they did kind of church planning pre-assessment. So it was my third year I took 4 years to finish seminary. And so Reebok and I went to this church planners assessment, and they ripped us to shreds. They're like, not only should you not plant a church, you should probably never say church planting again. What they said was consider your calling, and they meant consider your calling to church planting ministry, not ministry broadly. But I took that and I thought, what am I going to do? And there's kind of a whole series of events, but that's what led me into youth ministry. Is I'd kind of dismissed youth ministry before that, and then at that point, I was in the gutter and I needed something, and the youth pastor at my church took me under his wing and said, "Let's work through this together." And I don't remember the day, but every time I hear about a church plant, I'm like, "Oh gosh," I get the cold sweats, and I'm like, "Man, I'm glad that's Jason Cunningham and not me." But the Lord's used that in my life in a good way.
I would definitely say the airplane crash that I had, when everything that we did had no impact on the outcome. And it was totally the Lord that got us through. And even the captain who I was flying with at the time came back and said, there's nothing we did. It had to be God.
No.
And he wasn't even a believer. But I so many times we've been in the home sharing the gospel and stuff, and I recall this one circumstance where I was training two seniors in high school, and it was their turn to share, I think, Christ and faith, part of the gospel. We got knocked on the door. This was a couple that was visiting the church, and the lady answered, and she goes, "Well, we'd love to have you come in." And we were actually visiting the child who was at high school also as a follow-up to his attendance. But then she goes, "It's not really a good time because I just asked my husband for a divorce." And I go, oh, what do we do? But she goes, "But I want you to come in anyway and meet my husband." So, how do I get out of this one? So we bring the two kids in, and one thing after another happened. The baby choked on the cigarette butt. A parakeet got out of the cage and landed on one of our heads.
This is not a real story.
One thing after another. So we were waiting on the child who was in high school to come back from his friends down the street. And we started sharing what we were going to tell him about the gospel. And the two high school kids started sharing the gospel with this man that was just asked for a divorce. In the middle of the gospel, the young kid comes home, but this boy who I was training continued with the gospel. And he saw the love that we had for his child. And he wanted to hear what we had to say. That night, he trusted Christ.
Amen. Well, I want to also talk, Larry, about your Sunday night devotion. So Larry's going to give the Sunday evening devotion. I picked these texts that complement the morning text, and these guys take them up and bring us a word. So the one that Larry was assigned, I don't want anybody to mistake that he picked it, was Job 38:8. And so why don't you read it for us, and then just tell us what your main point to the church is going to be on Sunday night.
Okay, 38:8. I've got actually New American Standard here. "Who enclosed the sea with doors when bursting forth? It went out from the womb when I made a cloud its garment and thick darkness its swaddling hand." Verse 10, "And I placed boundaries on it, and I set a bolt and doors. And I said, thus far you shall come, but no further. And here shall be your proud waves stop." So Sunday evening, what we're going to look at is basically Theology 101, because Job is in school learning who God is. The same Jesus, the same God that was asleep in the boat, that stopped the seas, that stopped the wind, that showed the disciples who he was. We're going to see that same God displayed to Job. We're going to learn his character, who he is, and about the storms, and the trials that we use to learn from. Couple points here. I like this one here. God is going to show us awe in him. I love the way kids talk about this word in the States today. Awesome is everything. And really, to me, awesome shows God's character. And humility. God wants to humble us before we can see him. We have to get our eyes off ourselves. So it's the display of his grandeur to shift Job's focus on his suffering. He's looking at God. God, why did you do this? Why is this happening in my life? To the awe-inspiring nature of God, and God encouraging humility rather than giving explanations about everything. And I think a good verse for that is James 4:10. Humble yourself in the sight of the Lord, and he will lift you up. Secondly, he's sovereign creator. He highlights his role in building the universe. He shows it in the creation. He shows it in the waves, in the seas, in the depths, and laying the earth's foundation, limiting the sea, showing his ultimate control over his power. So just like in 38:8, who shut in the seas with doors? So Psalm 135:6, the Lord does whatever he pleases in the seas and all their depths. That reminds me of a saying from O.S. Hawkins. God does what he pleases, and he's pleased with what he does. You like that?
Oh, we get that stitched on a pillow.
I know you love it.
Tweet that out.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Stitched on a pillow.
So you can look at chaos, all the chaotic things that are happening in our life. God takes that chaos and he makes order out of it. And he did that with creation. We see that right in Genesis with his control. And he is here limiting the sets of everything he's created. 1 Corinthians 14:33 is God not a God of disorder, but is a God of peace. So I think he's our refuge. He's our strength. He's a present help in the time of trouble. And I think we have to see what the disciples had to learn, that Jesus was right there with them in the boat. He wasn't way off into space. He was right there. Now, he said that they lacked faith. Yes, they did. They didn't understand who he was yet. But they had enough faith to wake him up.
That's a good point.
But another issue here is, what did they do when they saw what he did? They were almost more fearful.
Yeah.
Because who is this man that has stilled the seas, that has stilled the wind? They didn't understand him. That blew them away. So they had to have a new learning of faith that this is the Creator God.
You know, as you're talking, it strikes me how parallel the disciples' reaction at the end is to Job. The entire book of Job is, 37 chapters of Job's friends saying, all these evil things have happened to you because you've sinned some great sin. What sin have you done that you're suffering like this? But Job turning around and saying, I haven't sinned anything. I shouldn't be suffering like this. It's this kind of back and forth. Why do bad things happen to good people? Job is like, I'm good. And they say he's bad. And then you get the Lord who comes in and says, let me show you what real righteousness looks like. You can't possibly begin to understand my ways, Job. You don't even understand how the weather works. You don't understand how the sea works. You think you can come tell me how I should run the world and what should happen to you. And Job ends the book with, he shuts his mouth. He says, I should never have spoken against the Almighty like that. And it's very parallel to, and they were filled with great fear. Who is this man that even the wind and the seas obey? Humility is a great point that, we can't begin to fathom and even have the right amount of awe of this God that controls the wind and the waves.
Excellent.
All right, final thoughts?
Is it tough preaching a passage that everybody's really familiar with?
It feels a little bit like a Super Bowl kind of situation where you're like, this one's so good, I don't want to ruin it for anybody.
Yeah.
I just come back to this one. And you sort of hit on it too. How wonderful it is that the Lord gave us this story. Like, this has been such a courage builder for so many people to read about what Jesus does here. I often come back to it. I'll probably say this in my sermon, but in one of those days and those times when one of those storms came, I probably listened to Alistair Begg's sermon on this text 20 times, just over and over again, because it was such a powerful comfort to me. And so, I don't want to take anything away from that comfort that it gives to people. You just kind of want to read it and move on. It's difficult to tread some of these well-worn paths, that people love so much, and to do them justice is very difficult. It's also good. I mean, I'm so thankful the Lord gave it. And, one point we shouldn't let go is the Lord used this in great ways in the disciples' lives. I mean, who knows what they were able to bear up under for the rest of their lives till the time they were martyred, by reminding themselves, he got us to the other side, even when we thought we were going to die. And so he promises to bring me home to him, even if I die, and he will. Any other final thoughts, questions, comments?
I would say God ordains everything.
That's right.
And he's got a purpose for everything he does.
I should have brought the worship guide. Mindy's still printing them, but the worship guide hits on just this thing. So we're going to read 3 parts of the Catechism in our Declaration of Truth, which is God's works of creation and God's works of providence, and how he carries them out in creation and providence. Oh, it's right here. How does God carry out his decrees in the works of creation and providence? What is creation? His making everything in 6 days, all very good. And what's his providence? So we're going to hit on all 3 of these things, because I think this text really illustrates that. And we're going to look at how in Psalm 107, those who go down in ships in the waves of the sea cry out to him. It's a very nautical themed service, because we're also going to finish with Christ the sure and steady anchor, which we sung on Sunday night. And so just a great hymn that will help carry you through dark seasons. All right, well, if you want to read ahead, make sure you're looking ahead to next week in chapter 5. We'll see Jesus' encounter with the demoniac, the man possessed with legion. But thank you again for joining us. We'll continue studying the Bible, walking through the scriptures, and asking ourselves each week, so what about us?
Thank you for joining us on this episode of So What About Us? If this show helped you connect the dots between Sunday and the rest of your week, share it with someone who needs to hear it. We'd also love to know how you're applying this in your own life. Send us an email at podcast@cmpca.org and let us know. Until next week, remember that Scripture isn't just asking, what about them? It's asking, what about us?